When Love Breaks All Boundaries. Intergalactic Hearts Sci-Fi Romance Revealed 1. Welcome to Intergalactic Hearts, the place where the boundaries of love, time, and space collide. I'm thrilled that you've joined us today for a story unlike anything you've ever experienced. In a world filled with stars, planets, and mysteries beyond our wildest imagination, love knows no limits. Today, we journey far from Earth, to a distant planet where a forbidden romance unfolds between a human and an extraordinary alien being. Now, I know you're probably wondering, how could love possibly thrive across the stars, between two beings so different? Is it even possible to bridge the gaps between worlds, between souls? As we dive into the story, I promise you one thing: each twist, each turn of this cosmic love affair, will keep you on the edge of your seat. With technology beyond comprehension, emotions that transcend space and time, and a passion that refuses to be stifled, this story is one you won't want to miss. So, grab your seat, and make sure to watch until the end. This video is packed with details and twists, and trust me, you'll want to catch every last moment of this intergalactic adventure. If this story sparks something within you, don't forget to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. Also, remember to hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss a new chapter in the universe of Intergalactic Hearts. Are you ready to fall in love across the stars? Let's begin this extraordinary journey. The stars hung above like 1,000 points of light scattered across the vast, endless abyss of space. Their shimmer was delicate, yet profound, like the unspoken promise of something vast and far beyond reach. But within this infinite expanse, there was one star that drew eyes from across the galaxy, Astra 9. A planet shrouded in mystery and enigma. Beneath the twin moons of Astra 9, Caleb Hunter, a human from Earth, stood on the edge of a gleaming platform. The city before him was a marvel of alien architecture. Curved metallic spires glistened against the silver sky, their surfaces reflective like liquid glass. The sounds of a bustling alien world reverberated in the air, a mix of otherworldly voices and the hum of advanced technology. His heart raced, not just with the awe of the place, but with the overwhelming sense of uncertainty that had followed him since he stepped foot on this planet. Caleb had been chosen for the mission to Astra 9. A high-stakes diplomatic effort to secure an alliance between Earth and the enigmatic inhabitants of this world. But despite his training, despite the years of preparation, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was waiting for him here, something far beyond the realms of what science could explain. He had heard rumors of a unique race that inhabited Astra 9, the area, an ancient alien species with extraordinary abilities, said to possess both mental and physical powers beyond human comprehension. They lived in the shadows of their sprawling cities, elusive and mysterious. As Caleb made his way through the bustling streets of the city, his thoughts drifted to his mission. His pulse quickened as the path ahead grew darker, the surrounding environment more enigmatic. Then, a voice broke through his thoughts, a soft, melodic sound that sent a shiver down his spine. "You must be Caleb Hunter," she said. He turned to see Lyra and Aria. She stood in the shadows, the glow of the city's lights illuminating her ethereal form. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with subtle hints of silver running through it. She was tall and graceful, her posture elegant but commanding. What struck him most were her eyes' deep pools of violet, as if the galaxy itself was contained within them. It felt like she could see right through him, read every thought, every hesitation, before he even uttered a word. "Yes," he replied, his voice hushed, trying to suppress the knot forming in his chest. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Lyra." She smiled, the expression both gentle and knowing. Her lips, soft and full, parted slightly as she spoke again. "I have been waiting for you," she said, her voice almost a whisper, like the wind across a silent sea. Caleb's heart skipped. There was something inexplicably magnetic about her, something in her presence that made it impossible to look away. Despite their clear differences, human and alien, two beings from entirely different worlds, he felt an undeniable pull. Lyra stepped closer, her movements smooth and fluid, like she was gliding across the ground. Her scent was intoxicating, a subtle blend of jasmine and something otherworldly, an aroma that seemed to reach into his very soul. Caleb couldn't help but feel his body react to her closeness, his breath becoming shallow. He was acutely aware of every detail, the way the soft, silvery glow of the city lights bounced off her pale skin. The way her eyes held secrets far older than any human civilization. "I've heard much about Earth," Lyra continued, her voice warm despite its alien quality. "But, it's your heart that intrigues me most." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning, and Caleb felt a flush rise to his cheeks. Was she speaking figuratively? Or was there something deeper, something more personal to her words? "I don't know what to say," Caleb stammered, his mind still reeling. "I'm here to learn, to understand. But this is..." He gestured to the city, the stark differences between their worlds suddenly feeling too overwhelming. Lyra tilted her head, a slight smile curving her lips. "You are here to learn, yes. But I believe there is much more you will discover on this world than you ever imagined." As she spoke, Caleb noticed something. Her presence was more than just physically alluring. It was as if every word she spoke vibrated with an energy that seemed to align with his own pulse. The air between them was thick with tension, yet it felt electric, as though their destinies had already begun to intertwine in ways neither of them fully understood. "I can show you more," Lyra added softly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "If you wish to know more, follow me. There is a place you must see." Caleb hesitated for a moment, but the pull between them was too strong. And before he realized it, he found himself walking beside her, stepping deeper into the labyrinthine streets of Astra 9. He could feel the weight of her gaze on him, her eyes watching him with an intensity that was both unnerving and hypnotic. Each step they took together felt like it was guiding him not just into the depths of the alien world, but into the unknown chambers of his own heart. For the first time since his arrival, Caleb was no longer just a visitor to this alien city. He was beginning to feel like a part of something much larger. And in the presence of Lyra, a being who was both like and unlike anything he had ever known, he couldn't help but feel that the real journey had only just begun. The streets of Astra 9 pulsed with an otherworldly energy. The ground beneath Caleb's feet vibrating gently as though the city itself was alive, breathing in sync with the rhythm of its inhabitants. He walked beside Lyra, captivated not just by her presence, but by the city's architectural wonders that seemed to blend nature with technology in a harmonious way. Towering structures reached toward the sky, their organic curves seamlessly merging with the luminous flora that grew like tendrils along the walls, glowing softly in the cool air. Caleb's heart raced, but it wasn't just the awe of this alien world, it was Lyra. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite define. But he felt it deeply in the pit of his stomach. Her quiet strength, the grace in her every movement, and that hypnotic aura that seemed to envelop her, made it impossible to focus on anything else. "This is the heart of our city," Lyra said. Her voice soft, almost ethereal, as they turned a corner into a quieter, more secluded area. "But it's not just about the city itself. It's about the energy that flows through us, through everything around us." Caleb tried to mask the unease creeping in. He had come here to study, to understand, but what she was describing went far beyond the science and diplomacy that had driven him to this planet. The words she spoke were not just about the city, they felt deeply personal, almost intimate. Lyra turned toward him, her eyes glowing faintly under the pale moonlight. She looked at him as if she could see right through to his thoughts. As though she understood him in ways no one ever had before. There was no mistaking the weight of her gaze, it was unlike anything Caleb had ever felt. In that moment, he realized that this mission, this simple diplomatic endeavor, was far more complex than he had ever imagined. It wasn't just about two worlds coming together, it was about something far deeper, something that had already begun to unravel within him. "You're different, Caleb," Lyra murmured. Her voice rich with the gravity of her words. "I can feel it. There's something inside of you that's pulling us together." He swallowed hard. His heart thudded painfully in his chest. She couldn't possibly know what she was saying. No one had ever looked at him this way before, not with such intensity, not with such certainty. He had always been the one who observed, who stood on the outside, trying to make sense of the world. But Lyra, she was the one who could see into him, and that terrified him in ways he didn't understand. "I don't know what you mean," Caleb said. His voice faltering slightly. He wasn't sure if he wanted to know the answer. Lyra smiled, and the expression softened her features. But it didn't make her gaze any less penetrating. "I'm not talking about your mind, Caleb. I'm talking about your heart. Your essence. It resonates with mine." Caleb stopped walking, his breath catching in his throat. This wasn't something he could rationalize, this wasn't a scientific anomaly he could study and catalog. This was real. This was something he couldn't control, and that made him both excited and terrified in equal measure. "Lyra. He didn't know how to finish his sentence, unsure of what he was feeling or how to process the emotions welling inside him. He was a stranger on this alien world, yet standing here with her, in this moment. He felt more alive than he had in years. Lyra closed the distance between them, the space between them shrinking with every heartbeat. Her presence surrounded him like a quiet storm, and he felt the temperature of the air shift, growing warmer with the electricity of their connection. She reached out, brushing her fingertips against his wrist. And Caleb's entire body reacted instantly. The touch was like a spark, sending a wave of warmth through him that felt like it had come from the very core of the planet itself. Her touch was gentle, but the effect it had on him was anything but. His pulse quickened, and for a moment, he was lost in the sensation, in the way her energy seemed to merge with his own. The strange, unexplainable connection between them was undeniable now. And the more he tried to push it away, the stronger it became. "I've never felt this before," Caleb confessed, his voice low and raw. This pull. It's like you're inside my head." Lyra's smile deepened, and her fingers slowly, almost reverently, traced the outline of his hand. "I know. And I've felt it too, Caleb. The energy between us is unlike anything I've ever experienced." She took a step closer, the space between them almost non-existent now. Caleb could feel the warmth radiating off her skin, the faint hum of energy that seemed to vibrate with every breath they took. Her violet eyes were no longer just a curiosity, they were a window to something far deeper, and he was both terrified and mesmerized by what lay within them. "I can show you more," she whispered, her voice hushed and full of promise. "There's much more to understand, to feel. But only if you let me." Caleb stood frozen, torn between the instinct to pull away and the need to stay, to dive deeper into the unknown. He had come to Astra 9 seeking answers, but it was clear now that what he was searching for was not something that could be measured or explained with the logic of science. This was something more. Something that transcended reason and ventured into the realm of the heart. The universe, vast and unknowable, had just opened up in front of him, and it had taken the form of Lyra. She was everything he had never known he needed. Her presence was a question and an answer all at once. And he wasn't sure whether he was ready to face what that meant. But there was no turning back now. Not after this moment, not after the way her touch had ignited something deep inside of him. "I'm ready," he whispered, the words coming out before he even realized he'd spoken them. "Show me." And with that, Lyra's eyes softened, and she stepped forward, pulling him closer. The city of Astra 9 seemed to fade into the background as they stood together, two beings from completely different worlds, united by something inexplicable but undeniable. And in that moment, Caleb realized that his life had just changed forever. The days following Caleb's confession to Lyra blurred together in a haze of new experiences, each one more intense than the last. He had come to Astra 9 expecting to learn about a new planet, its people, and its technologies. But what he found was far beyond his expectations. He found Lyra. They spent their time together, exploring the alien city, navigating its bustling streets and tranquil parks. But every moment, every touch between them, was charged with an intensity Caleb couldn't ignore. The city around him was dazzling in its beauty, with shimmering structures made of materials that seemed to pulse with life. But none of it compared to the magnetic pull he felt whenever he was near Lyra. She guided him through the city with ease, showing him the wonders of Astra 9's advanced technology. But there was always a sense of intimacy between them. They spoke not just with words, but with glances and silences that held volumes. The connection between them deepened, unspoken but undeniable. One evening, as they stood in a secluded courtyard surrounded by bioluminescent plants that glowed softly in the twilight, Lyra reached for Caleb's hand, her fingers brushing against his with a tenderness that sent a shock through his body. "You feel it, don't you?" Lyra asked, her voice almost a whisper, like the soft rustling of the leaves around them. Her violet eyes glimmered in the dim light, and Caleb couldn't tear his gaze away. He had never been one to believe in fate, but standing here with her, feeling the warmth of her touch, he couldn't help but think that this was more than chance. He nodded slowly, his heart racing in his chest. "I do," he said, his voice low, filled with awe. "I can't explain it, but I feel like you and I are connected in a way that goes beyond anything I've ever known." Lyra smiled, her lips curving up with a softness that made Caleb's chest tighten. "It's more than just a connection, Caleb," she said. "It's a bond. One that transcends the limits of time and space." Caleb's brow furrowed in confusion. "A bond," he repeated. He knew there was something different about their relationship, but hearing her speak of it so openly made his mind race. "Yes," Lyra said, her tone suddenly serious. "A bond that runs deep within both of us. A bond that has been there from the moment we met, even before that. Our worlds, your Earth and my Astra 9, are not as far apart as they seem. The energy that flows between us is older than both our civilizations. It's an ancient force that has been guiding us together, even before we realized it." Caleb's breath hitched in his throat. "Are you saying this is destined?" he asked, trying to wrap his mind around the magnitude of her words. Lyra stepped closer to him, her voice soft yet full of conviction. "I'm saying that this is more than just a meeting of two people from different worlds. This is the union of two energies, two souls that have always been meant to come together." Her words struck him like a thunderclap, and he was overcome with a strange sense of certainty. As if every fiber of his being knew it was true. It didn't make sense, but it felt right. He could feel it deep within him, in the very core of his being. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like this," Caleb confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. This is overwhelming. I don't understand it, and I don't know how to deal with it." Lyra reached out, her fingers grazing his cheek, her touch sending a shock through his body. "You don't have to understand it, Caleb," she said, her voice tender. "You just have to trust it. Trust me, and trust yourself. This is what you've been searching for your entire life." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time since arriving on Astra 9, he didn't feel out of place. He didn't feel like an outsider. With her, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "I want to trust you," Caleb whispered, his breath shaky. "I just don't know how." Lyra's eyes softened, and she placed her hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. "You don't have to know how, Caleb. You already do. You just have to let go of the fear, and embrace this bond we share." Caleb closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. The cool night air, filled with the sweet scent of alien flowers, seemed to calm his racing thoughts. He had spent his whole life trying to understand everything, trying to break everything down into logical pieces. But standing here with Lyra, he realized that some things couldn't be explained. Some things had to be felt, experienced. And what he was feeling in this moment with her, was unlike anything he had ever known. Lyra leaned in, her lips brushing gently against his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if both of them were testing the waters. But as their lips met again, more deeply this time, something inside Caleb snapped. He couldn't hold back anymore. He responded to her kiss with a hunger he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. The warmth of her body against his, the sweetness of her touch. It was all too much, and yet, it was exactly what he needed. When they finally pulled away, Caleb's chest was heaving, and his mind was spinning. But there was no doubt in his heart anymore. He knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this was where he was meant to be. With Lyra. With her, and with the bond they shared. He smiled, his lips still tingling from the kiss. "I trust you," he said softly. "I'm ready." Lyra's smile deepened, and she pulled him closer. Her hand resting gently against his cheek. "I knew you would be," she whispered. "Now, let's take the next step together." And as they stood there, under the soft glow of the alien stars, Caleb realized that his life had changed forever. The journey ahead would be unlike anything he had ever imagined. But with Lyra by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and Caleb found himself falling deeper into the world of Astra 9 and its enigmatic beauty. But more than anything, he found himself falling more deeply in love with Lyra. Her presence was like a constant pull, like the gravitational force of a star that he couldn't resist. Every glance they shared, every touch, felt as if their souls were connecting in ways he could never fully understand. Yet somehow, he knew it was the most real thing in his life. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing moment, and Caleb began to sense that there was something more to the bond they shared than mere attraction. Lyra's enigmatic words about their connection rang in his ears, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something far beyond what he had been prepared for. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through the city's quietest and most beautiful district, where the buildings were made of shifting glass that seemed to breathe in time with the wind, Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "Caleb, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice quieter than usual. The air around them buzzed with the soft hum of Astra 9's unique energy fields, and Caleb felt his heart flutter at the look in her eyes. She had always been open with him, but this was different. This was something heavier, something important. "What is it?" Caleb asked, his voice low, the intensity of the moment making his chest tighten. He didn't want to break the delicate tension between them, but he also needed to know what was on her mind. Lyra took a deep breath and looked down at the ground for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. Then she looked back at him, her violet eyes dark and filled with a depth that sent a shiver through his body. "We are connected, Caleb," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "In ways you don't yet fully understand. It's not just a bond between us, our connection goes beyond the physical, beyond the emotional. It transcends time itself." Caleb's heart skipped a beat, and his mind whirled with questions. He had known there was something extraordinary about their relationship, but this was something else entirely. "What do you mean, beyond time?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The air around them seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, and for the first time since arriving on Astra 9, he felt as if the ground beneath his feet was shifting. Lyra stepped closer to him, her hand gently brushing his chest, her touch sending warmth coursing through him. "I don't fully understand it either, but I feel it," she continued, her voice soft, as if revealing a secret that had been kept from her for centuries. "There's an ancient force that binds us, Caleb. It's woven into the very fabric of who we are, our souls, our destinies. The connection we share is something that's been passed down through generations through both our worlds." Caleb's mind was reeling. He had thought this was just a connection, a strange, powerful connection, but now he realized it was far more. It was something older, something ancient. Something that was shaping their lives, their choices, and their futures. "Is this normal?" Caleb asked, his voice filled with a mix of wonder and fear. "Are all humans and Astra 9's people connected like this?" Lyra shook her head, her face serious. "No, Caleb. This is unique. We were always meant to meet. Our bond has been foretold in the ancient texts of Astra 9. It is a union of two worlds, two species. A coming together of energies that have been waiting for centuries." Caleb's heart hammered in his chest as he tried to process what she was saying. This was more than just an intergalactic romance, it was an alignment of the stars, a union of forces that defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. "I don't understand," Caleb said softly, looking into Lyra's eyes. "How can this be possible? How can we be connected like this?" Lyra placed a hand on his cheek, her touch gentle and tender. "I don't have all the answers, Caleb. But I know this. You and I were meant to come together. The energy that binds us isn't something we can control or even understand completely. But it's real. And it's something we must honor." As she spoke, Caleb's heart swelled with a strange mix of emotions: love, fear, awe, and a deep, deep longing. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know what this meant for their future, for their love, for their worlds. But at the same time, he felt overwhelmed by the weight of it all. The realization that their bond was more than just a connection, it was a destiny, was almost too much to bear. "What happens now?" Caleb asked, his voice barely a whisper. He was afraid to hear the answer, yet he couldn't stop himself from asking. Lyra smiled softly, the sadness in her eyes softening as she reached up to brush a lock of hair from his forehead. "Now, we trust," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "We trust in what we built, in the connection that has brought us together. And we move forward, together. No matter what comes." Caleb stood in silence for a long moment, his gaze never leaving hers. He could feel the weight of her words settling into his soul, could feel the ancient energy flowing between them, guiding them forward. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away from this. He couldn't walk away from Lyra. "I'm with you," Caleb said, his voice strong, filled with resolve. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm with you, Lyra. Always." Lyra's smile was soft, her eyes shining with an emotion Caleb couldn't quite name. She reached up to kiss him, and as their lips met, it was like the universe itself held its breath. There was something deep and eternal in that kiss, something that transcended time and space, something that bound them together in ways neither of them could fully comprehend. When they finally pulled away, Caleb knew that their journey had only just begun. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainty, but with Lyra by his side, he felt ready to face whatever the universe threw at them. Weeks passed, and Caleb found himself in a constant state of emotional turbulence. His connection to Lyra had only deepened, and with each day that they spent together, his longing for her grew stronger. But the bond they shared, an ancient connection beyond time and space, wasn't without its complications. As their relationship progressed, Caleb couldn't help but feel that the weight of this destiny was pressing down on them, threatening to crush them both. Astra 9, with its breathtaking landscapes and advanced technology, seemed like a dream to Caleb. Yet beneath its shimmering surface, a storm was brewing. Lyra had warned him that their connection would not go unnoticed, that there were forces beyond their control that would seek to intervene. She had spoken of the Council, the powerful leaders of Astra 9, and their deep-rooted traditions, which did not always welcome the union of different species. He had dismissed her warnings at first, too overwhelmed by his own feelings to truly understand the implications. Now, however, those warnings were becoming terrifyingly real. One day, as they walked through the bustling marketplace of Astra 9's capital city, their hands intertwined. Caleb noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The people around them, once warm and welcoming, now regarded them with suspicion. Whispers seemed to follow them, eyes tracking their every move. Lyra's face, usually serene and calm, had a subtle tension to it as she led him through the crowd. "Lyra," Caleb whispered, his heart pounding in his chest, "what's happening?" Lyra's grip on his hand tightened as she glanced around, her violet eyes scanning the faces of the crowd. "The Council knows about us," she replied, her voice barely audible. "They're watching us. They don't approve of what we've become. They fear what our bond might mean for the future of our worlds." Caleb's stomach churned with dread. He had known that their love was special, but he hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of it until now. He had thought that love, no matter how different the species, would be enough to overcome any obstacle. But in this world, where tradition and ancient laws ruled over everything, love wasn't enough. Not when it threatened to disrupt the delicate balance of power. "Are they going to do something?" Caleb asked, his voice trembling. Lyra's face hardened, her jaw clenched. "They already are. They'll do whatever it takes to keep our union from growing stronger. You're human, Caleb. You weren't meant to be a part of Astra 9's future." The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He had always known that he was an outsider, a human on an alien planet, but hearing it from Lyra, someone who had always stood by him, felt like a betrayal. He couldn't lose her, not after everything they had shared. But the reality of their situation was setting in. The forces against them were too strong, and he was only one human in a world full of alien traditions. "What do we do?" Caleb asked, his voice rough with emotion. "How do we fight this?" Lyra paused, turning to face him, her eyes filled with a sadness that broke his heart. "We can't fight them, Caleb," she whispered. "Not directly. But we can leave. We can run away. Caleb's heart leaped in his chest. The thought of leaving Astra 9, of leaving everything behind to be with her, was both terrifying and exhilarating. He had never imagined his life could take such a dramatic turn, but now, faced with the possibility of losing her, he realized he would do anything to keep their love alive. "Where would we go?" he asked, desperate. "Anywhere," Lyra replied softly. "Somewhere far from the Council's reach. Somewhere we can be free." The idea of fleeing filled Caleb with a strange sense of peace. He had never felt more alive, more certain of what he wanted. But at the same time, the enormity of the decision settled heavily on him. Could they really leave everything behind? Could they escape the power of the Council and the unrelenting force of tradition? "Let's do it," Caleb said, his voice filled with determination. "I don't care about anything else. I care about you. And I will fight for us, Lyra. Always." Lyra's eyes softened, and she pulled him into a tight embrace. "I knew you would say that," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Together, we can face anything." As they stood there, holding each other in the midst of the marketplace, Caleb realized that this wasn't just about escaping the Council. This was about embracing their love, no matter the cost. It was about finding a way to be together in a world that didn't understand them, a world that was determined to tear them apart. The bond they shared was undeniable, and it had the power to change everything, not just for them, but for their worlds, for the future. And Caleb was ready to fight for it. But as the sounds of the marketplace faded into the background, a new sound emerged, a low, ominous hum. A feeling of dread washed over Caleb, and he instinctively pulled Lyra closer. "What is that?" he asked, his heart racing. Lyra's expression turned pale as she looked over his shoulder. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The Council's enforcers. They've come for us." Before Caleb could react, a group of heavily armored guards appeared from the shadows, their weapons drawn, and their eyes cold with purpose. The crowd parted as the guards made their way toward them, their steps heavy and deliberate. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the danger they were in. "You need to run," Lyra said urgently, her eyes wide with fear. "Now." Caleb didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her with him as they sprinted through the streets of Astra 9. The guards hot on their trail. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew one thing. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe. The future of their love, their destiny, was uncertain. But one thing was clear. They weren't going down without a fight. The streets of Astra 9 twisted and turned like an endless labyrinth. Its neon lights casting strange, flickering shadows across the cobblestone paths. Caleb's breath was ragged, his pulse pounding in his ears as he pulled Lyra through the dense crowd, their feet pounding against the surface of the foreign world. The enforcers were close, their heavy boots thundering in pursuit. "Where do we go?" Caleb gasped, sweat trickling down his forehead. He could feel the weight of Lyra's hand in his, her grip strong yet trembling. Her violet eyes, usually calm and filled with certainty, now shone with an unfamiliar panic. "Just keep running," Lyra urged, her voice tight with fear. We need to get to the hidden tunnels beneath the city. It's the only way they won't find us. As they rounded a corner, Caleb's eyes darted to the sky, where distant ships hovered above, their lights blinking like stars. He knew that the Council's reach extended far beyond the streets they were fleeing through. If they didn't make it to the tunnels in time, they'd be trapped with no escape. "Do you know the way?" Caleb asked, his voice strained. Lyra nodded, though her expression was clouded with uncertainty. "I've only been there once, but I remember the entrance. It's hidden beneath the old market." The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing off the stone walls around them. Caleb's heart raced faster, but he didn't dare slow down. He wouldn't let them catch them. Not when he had finally found something worth fighting for. "Through here," Lyra shouted, pulling Caleb into a narrow alleyway that seemed to disappear into the shadows. She moved with the grace and agility of someone who had lived her entire life on this planet, but Caleb, despite his best efforts, struggled to keep up. His legs felt like lead, the alien air unfamiliar and thick in his lungs. As they reached the end of the alley, Caleb's eyes caught a glint of metal, half hidden beneath a pile of old crates. Lyra's eyes widened with recognition. "There it is," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. But before they could move toward it, a low voice boomed from behind them. "Stop," one of the enforcers commanded, his voice amplified by a speaker. Caleb spun around, heart pounding in his chest, as a group of heavily armed guards appeared at the end of the alley. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, but Caleb could feel the threat radiating from them like an oppressive wave. They had no choice now, they couldn't outrun them. Lyra's grip on his hand tightened. "We need to make a stand," she said, her voice low but fierce. Caleb's mind raced as he scanned their surroundings. They had nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The only option left was to fight. But how could they possibly win against a group of enforcers with advanced weapons? "Do you have a plan?" he asked, his voice desperate. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "I have a few tricks up my sleeve." Before Caleb could respond, Lyra stepped forward, releasing his hand. A strange hum filled the air, and suddenly, the enforcers froze in place, their weapons raised, but their bodies rigid as if controlled by an invisible force. Caleb blinked in confusion as Lyra stood tall, her expression one of intense focus. "Stay back," she ordered, her voice now commanding and powerful. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will." The enforcers slowly lowered their weapons, their movements sluggish, as if they were fighting against an unseen force. Lyra's eyes glowed a brighter shade of violet, and Caleb could feel the air around them shift, vibrating with energy. It was the same energy that had drawn him to her from the start, a force he still didn't fully understand. "You're controlling them?" Caleb asked, awe in his voice. Lyra nodded, her focus never wavering. "I can manipulate the minds of others, a power that my people have kept hidden for generations. But I don't use it lightly." Caleb watched in awe as Lyra's power held the enforcers in place. He couldn't believe what he was seeing, but he also knew that this was their chance. They had to escape before the enforcers regained control. "Let's go," Lyra urged, her voice soft but urgent. Without waiting for Caleb to respond, she moved toward the hidden entrance beneath the crates. Caleb followed, his heart still racing, his thoughts spinning. He had always known that Lyra was different, but seeing her unleash her power like that only deepened the mystery of who she truly was. And what did it mean for their future together? They ducked through the narrow entrance, sliding into the shadows of the underground tunnels. The sound of the enforcers' muffled voices faded behind them, and for a brief moment, Caleb felt a sense of relief. They had escaped for now. But Lyra's expression remained tense. "We can't stay here long," she said, her voice tight. "They will come for us." Caleb nodded, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. But one thing was clear. Their fight wasn't over. They would have to keep moving, keep running, and find a way to stay one step ahead of the Council's enforcers. Their love was now a rebellion, a defiance against everything that Astra 9's leaders had ever known. And Caleb was ready for whatever came next. The underground tunnels were cold and damp, their walls slick with moisture as they wound deeper into the heart of Astra 9's forgotten underbelly. The dim glow of Lyra's violet eyes illuminated the path ahead, but Caleb's mind was elsewhere. He was still processing the unbelievable things he had just witnessed: Lyra's power, the way she controlled the enforcers with nothing but her will. He glanced at her as she led the way, the steady rhythm of her footsteps echoing in the narrow corridor. Her presence, though strong, had an air of quiet sadness around it. She was running from something, he knew that much. But from what? What could be so dangerous that even someone with powers like hers had to hide? "Lyra," Caleb spoke softly, his voice filled with uncertainty, "you said they'll come for us. But why? What are we running from exactly?" She didn't immediately answer, and Caleb didn't press. He knew from the few conversations they'd had that Lyra didn't reveal much about herself, especially not the things that weighed most heavily on her. Yet, for the first time, he felt like he was seeing her in a new light, a light that made him question everything he thought he knew about her. Finally, she stopped and turned to face him, her violet eyes soft but guarded. "I'm not just running from the Council, Caleb," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm running from my past. From what I've become. There's a darkness inside of me that even I can't control." Caleb's heart tightened as he listened to her words, a deep sense of empathy rising within him. "What happened to you, Lyra?" he asked, stepping closer. "What aren't you telling me?" She shook her head, her long, dark hair shifting with the movement. "It's not something I can explain. Not now. But one day, when the time is right, you'll understand." There was a quiet desperation in her voice, a plea for him to understand that this wasn't just a matter of running from enemies. This was about her own battle with something inside herself. Caleb didn't press her for more answers, he knew better than that. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch a silent promise that no matter what secrets she held, he wouldn't turn away. They continued their journey through the darkened tunnels. Lyra moving with an eerie calm despite the weight of her own turmoil. Caleb, however, couldn't shake the growing sense of dread that had settled in his chest. There was more to the story than Lyra was letting on, and he feared that once the truth came to light, neither of them would ever be the same. They finally arrived at a small, hidden chamber deep within the underground labyrinth, the air thick with the scent of ancient technology and forgotten memories. It was here, Lyra had told him, that they could rest for a moment and regroup. But Caleb didn't feel safe, not with the looming threat of the Council's forces closing in on them. Every minute that passed felt like another step closer to the edge of something they couldn't control. Lyra motioned for him to sit by a small fire that burned brightly in the center of the room. It cast flickering shadows on the walls, and Caleb felt an odd sense of peace as he watched the flames dance. But the moment was short-lived. Lyra had already begun to pace again, her mind clearly elsewhere. "You don't trust me, do you?" Lyra's voice suddenly cut through the silence. Caleb blinked, caught off guard by her question. "What do you mean?" Lyra stopped pacing and turned to face him, her eyes filled with an intensity that he hadn't seen before. "You think I'm hiding something from you?" "And I am," she said, her voice steady but laced with regret. "I've been running for so long, Caleb. I've kept my secrets because I thought they'd protect you. But the truth is, I'm scared. Scared of what might happen if you knew the whole truth." Caleb stood up and walked toward her. He could feel the weight of her words in his chest, but something deep inside him urged him to step closer. "Lyra, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to be scared of me." Her eyes softened slightly, but there was still an undeniable tension in her stance. "I've seen what happens when people trust others too easily," she whispered. "My kind, we're not like humans. We've been born into a system that values control over emotion, power over love. My past is one of manipulation and cruelty. And I've been a part of that." The words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. Lyra, the person he had come to care for, had once been a tool of something darker, something more destructive than he could have imagined. And yet, here she was, standing before him, seeking something different, seeking redemption. "I'm not that person anymore, Caleb," she said, her voice breaking. "I want to change. But I don't know if it's even possible." Caleb took a deep breath, his hand reaching out toward her. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of the moment heavy between them. Caleb wasn't sure if he could fix everything for Lyra, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. "Let's figure this out together," he said, his voice firm, his heart pounding with determination. "I don't know what's waiting for us out there, but we can face it as long as we're together." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening for the first time in what felt like ages. She nodded, the faintest of smiles tugging at her lips. "Together," she whispered. And in that moment, Caleb knew that no matter what lay ahead, they had a chance. A chance to face whatever darkness haunted Lyra's past, and a chance to find a future where they could finally be free from the chains of their respective worlds. The underground chamber was thick with silence. The weight of their conversation hanging in the air like a dense fog. Lyra sat with her back to the glowing fire, her face illuminated by its flickering light, but her eyes remained distant, lost in the shadows of a past she couldn't escape. Caleb sat across from her, his mind racing, trying to piece together the fragments of her story. Every word she had spoken felt like a key to understanding the enigma that was Lyra, but the deeper he delved, the more complicated the puzzle seemed to become. His heart ached for her. She had spoken of her past, of a life lived in shadows, manipulating and controlling, but he refused to let that define her. He had seen the woman she was now, the one who had saved him, who had fought for what was right. There was so much more to Lyra than the secrets she kept hidden, and he wasn't going to walk away from her now. But Caleb had his own burdens to bear. He couldn't help but wonder if he was truly ready for the kind of relationship Lyra needed. Her past was a labyrinth of lies, betrayal, and darkness, and though she had turned away from it, could he truly accept everything about her? Or would he, too, be consumed by the weight of her secrets? A loud crack from the fire pulled Caleb from his thoughts, and he looked up to find Lyra staring at him, her eyes a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I should tell you everything, Caleb," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Caleb's heart sped up. He knew this moment would come, the moment when the truth, the whole truth, would finally be revealed. But was he ready to hear it? "Do you want to know?" Lyra asked softly, her gaze unwavering. "Are you sure?" He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I want to know everything, Lyra. You don't have to hide anything from me." Her eyes softened for a moment before she turned to the fire, the flames reflecting in her violet irises. She took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to speak the words she had been holding back for so long. "I was born into a world that thrived on control. We, my people, are part of a larger empire. We were created to be tools of war, of power, and of manipulation. We were taught from the moment we could understand to never question authority, never show emotion, never care for anyone other than ourselves. Love was seen as weakness. Compassion, a flaw." She paused, her hand tracing a line in the air, as if the memory itself was painful to touch. "I was bred for a purpose, Caleb. To serve, to obey." Caleb leaned forward, his gaze fixed on her, urging her to continue. But she hesitated, her face darkening. "Who was he?" Caleb asked gently. Lyra met his eyes, the storm in her gaze undeniable. "He was everything I was told to avoid. He was human, an enemy, a rebel who fought against the very system that created me. He made me question everything I knew, everything I was. He showed me love when I had never known it. And Lyra's voice faltered, her hands trembling. "He changed me. But in the end, it was too late. The system didn't let me go. They erased him, and they tried to erase me too. But I escaped." Her voice broke, and for the first time, Caleb saw the full weight of her pain. She wasn't just running from the council. She was running from herself, from the choices she had made, from the impossible love she had lost. Caleb stood up, and moved to her side, his hand reaching out to touch her arm, his fingers brushing lightly against her skin. The touch was soft but grounding, a reminder that he was here, that he wasn't going anywhere. "You don't have to carry this alone, Lyra," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't care about your past. I care about who you are now. And I know that you've changed. I've seen it with my own eyes. You're not that person anymore. You're not a weapon. You're not a tool. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. She had wanted to hide, to run, to protect Caleb from the monster she thought she was. But now, in this moment, with him standing beside her, she realized that she didn't have to be afraid anymore. "I'm scared, Caleb," she whispered. "What if I can't keep the darkness inside of me in check? What if I hurt you? What if I fail?" Caleb's heart swelled with an overwhelming sense of love and protectiveness. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "You won't fail, Lyra," he said, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. "You're stronger than you think. And no matter what happens, I'll be here, by your side. We'll face it together." For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to believe him. She closed her eyes, and leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his hand on her skin, grounding her, calming the storm inside her. She had been running for so long, but now, for the first time, she felt like she could stop. "Together," she whispered. And in that moment, the weight of her past seemed just a little bit lighter, as if the love and support from Caleb could give her the strength to fight whatever darkness still lingered inside her. The moment they shared seemed like an eternity. As though the universe itself held its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. Lyra, for the first time, felt as though she could stand in the light without the fear of being consumed by it. And yet, the peace was fleeting. The shadows that had chased her for so long were not far behind, lurking in every corner, threatening to pull her back into the life she had tried so desperately to escape. Caleb could feel the undercurrent of tension in the air. Despite the calm that had settled between them, a storm was coming. The council would not stop hunting her. They never did. And with every passing moment, the urgency of the situation grew stronger. The time for running was over. The time for fighting had come. The door to the chamber clicked open, and a figure stepped inside, silhouetted by the dim light of the corridor beyond. Lyra's heart skipped a beat, her senses immediately alert. Caleb, too, tensed at the sight of the newcomer, tall, imposing, with a cold, calculating expression. "Lyra," the figure said, his voice a smooth, but somehow venomous drawl. "I knew you'd find your way here eventually." Lyra stood up immediately, her hand instinctively going to the blade at her side. "Zarvik," she whispered, her voice tight with both fear and anger. "I should have known you'd come for me." Zarvik smirked, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You think you can run forever? Your past is never as far behind as you want it to be, Lyra. The council will always come for their own, and you." He gestured to Caleb, who had taken a defensive stance beside her. "You're only making things worse by protecting her." Caleb's voice was low, steady. "You don't know anything about us, about what we've been through. She's not your possession. She's a person. And if you think you're just going to take her back without a fight, you're wrong." Zarvik's gaze flickered to Caleb, a laugh escaping his lips. "How quaint. The human thinks he can protect her. Does he understand what she really is? What she was created to do? Lyra felt her pulse quicken, her breath shallow. Zarvik's words cut deep, stirring the doubts she had long buried. Was Caleb truly prepared for the truth of what she had been made to do? And if he knew the full extent of her abilities, of the horrors she had committed, would he still love her? "Caleb," Lyra said, her voice shaky. "There's so much you don't know. I'm not just someone who's escaped the council. I was part of their most dangerous weapon program. I was trained to eliminate targets without hesitation, without remorse. I don't want to go back to that, but..." "But what?" Caleb interrupted, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her stop. "But you think I can't handle it? You think that because of what's in your past, you're too broken to be loved?" Lyra shook her head, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "No, it's not that. It's that I've done things, terrible things. Things that you won't understand. The person I used to be, the one that Zarvik knew, she's not gone. She's still a part of me. And I'm scared that I'll hurt you." Caleb took a step forward, his voice unwavering. "Lyra, I don't care what you've done. I care about who you are now. And who you are now is someone who wants to change, someone who wants to be better. That's all that matters to me." Zarvik's smile faded, replaced by a look of sheer frustration. "You don't know what you're saying, human. She's a weapon. She can never be anything more than that. And you..." He narrowed his eyes at Caleb. "You are only in the way." The tension in the room escalated. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, the fear of what Zarvik might do next suffocating her. But she also felt something else, something stronger than the fear. The fierce protectiveness Caleb had shown her, the love he had so freely given, was all the strength she needed to stand her ground. "You don't get to decide who I am, Zarvik," she said, her voice cold and hard. "I'm not your weapon anymore. I'm not anyone's. And if you think you can threaten Caleb, or anyone else I care about, you're wrong." The room was electric with the force of her words, and for the first time, Lyra felt truly free. Free from the chains of her past, free from the life that had been forced upon her. And it was Caleb who had shown her how to embrace that freedom. Zarvik seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, his lips curling into a sneer. "We'll see about that." He turned to leave, but not before throwing one last warning glance over his shoulder. "The council won't stop. You'll never be safe." As the door slammed shut behind him, the room fell into an eerie silence. Lyra's knees felt weak, but Caleb was there, his strong arms supporting her, grounding her. "It's not over, is it?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," Caleb replied softly, his lips brushing her forehead in a gentle kiss. "But together, we'll face whatever comes next. I'm not leaving you, Lyra. Not now. Not ever." In that moment, Lyra realized that no matter what happened, they would fight together. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. The days following Zarvik's warning were filled with a strange calm. But it was the calm before the storm. Lyra and Caleb knew that the council was only a step behind. Every move they made, every step they took, felt like it brought them closer to a reckoning they couldn't avoid. The tension between them was palpable, but so was their love, a bond that had grown stronger with every obstacle they had overcome. Lyra's abilities were more than just a gift, they were a curse. The memories of her training, the bloodshed, the lives she had taken, haunted her. And though Caleb's love had softened the edges of her pain, there was still a part of her that feared it would always be there, lurking just beneath the surface, ready to break free. But with Caleb by her side, she had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could overcome it. But the time for hiding was over. "We need to face them," Caleb said one evening, his voice steady, yet filled with the weight of what was to come. They stood on the balcony of their hidden apartment, looking out over the bustling city of Kalis, a city that had once felt like a sanctuary, but now seemed more like a cage. Lyra turned to him, her face pale but resolute. "I know. But I'm scared, Caleb. If the council catches us, they'll never stop coming. I'll never be free. And you?" Caleb cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intense but tender. "I'm not afraid of the council. I'm not afraid of anything as long as I'm with you. We've made it this far, and we'll make it the rest of the way. Together." His words, so simple and yet so powerful, made her heart swell with emotion. She had spent so long running, hiding from her past, from herself. But now, standing here, facing the uncertain future with Caleb at her side, she felt a new kind of strength. A strength that came from their love, a love that refused to be torn apart. They didn't have much time. The council's enforcers were closing in, their presence becoming more evident with each passing day. But Lyra wasn't the same person she had been when they first met. She was no longer the weapon the council had created. She was more than that now. And she was ready to fight for her freedom. The plan was simple: ambush the council's enforcers, destroy their communication relay, and send a message that they would no longer be controlled. It was dangerous, reckless, and exactly what they needed to do. As they prepared for the final confrontation, Caleb could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't someone trained for combat. But for Lyra, he would do anything. They had come so far. And there was no way in hell he was going to let the council take her from him. They slipped into the heart of the city's underground, the dark, oppressive corridors, a stark contrast to the vibrant city above. Lyra led the way, her movements fluid and silent, every step calculated. Caleb followed close behind, his heart pounding in his chest, his instincts heightened by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. They reached the heart of the council's stronghold just as the first wave of enforcers arrived. Lyra's eyes glinted with determination as she activated the pulse bomb strapped to her belt. A flash of blue light illuminated the corridor as the device hummed to life, sending a shockwave through the building. The enforcers were fast, but Lyra was faster. In a blur of motion, she took them down one by one, her enhanced strength and agility making her a formidable opponent. Caleb fought alongside her, though his skill was far less refined. But his love for her, his need to protect her, fueled his every move. The air was thick with the sound of gunfire, the clash of metal against metal, the deafening echoes of battle. And through it all, Lyra and Caleb moved as one, united, unstoppable. As the final enforcer fell, Lyra stood amidst the wreckage, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The pulse bomb had worked. There was no communication, no way for the council to call for reinforcements. They had won. For now. But the victory was bittersweet. Lyra knew that the council would not let this stand. They would come for her. They would come for both of them. And though they had won this battle, the war was far from over. Caleb approached her, his hand reaching out to gently touch her arm. "We did it. We're free." Lyra looked at him, her eyes soft, yet filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. "For now. But we both know this isn't the end. The council will never stop coming for us." Caleb smiled, a smile filled with quiet defiance. "Then we'll keep fighting. Together. As long as we have each other, nothing else matters." And in that moment, amidst the wreckage of their final battle, Lyra realized something she hadn't allowed herself to believe before. She wasn't broken. She wasn't a weapon. She was a person who had been loved, who had loved in return, and who would fight to the end for the one she loved. And as long as Caleb was by her side, she knew that they would face whatever came next, together. And there we have it, fellow dreamers. The journey between two worlds, bound by a love that defies all odds, is just beginning. Intergalactic Hearts continues to prove that love is more than just a feeling, it's a force, a pull stronger than gravity itself. As we saw today, the bond between two souls can transcend even the vastest of distances, but it's never without its challenges, its sacrifices. This is just one chapter in a much larger story, and I can't wait to explore more with all of you. But before you go, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you think of the love blossoming between our human and alien characters? Do you believe in love that knows no bounds? Drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. Your feedback and thoughts are what keep Intergalactic Hearts alive. If you enjoyed this story and want to continue exploring more intergalactic love, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there's so much more ahead. The universe is full of surprises, and with Intergalactic Hearts, we'll uncover them together. Until next time, remember, love has no limits, no matter where it takes us. See you in the stars.